Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off this presentation on neural control and coordination. Today, we'll explore how our nervous system manages and integrates various functions in the body. The title of our presentation is Neural Control and Coordination, and we'll be covering key concepts, mechanisms, and examples. So, let's get started and discover how our body's intricate control system keeps us functioning smoothly. Let's dive into the mechanism of vision, which is a fascinating process involving various parts of our nervous system. When light enters the eye, it passes through the cornea and lens, focusing onto the retina where photoreceptor cells detect the light. These cells convert light signals into electrical impulses. The eye, being a crucial sensory organ, plays a vital role in perceiving visual stimuli. Once the retina processes the light, the electrical signals are transmitted through the optic nerve, which is part of the human neural system. This transmission involves complex neural pathways that relay the information to the brain, specifically to the visual cortex. Now, connecting this to other reflex actions, we see that reflexes like the pupil constriction in response to bright light are mediated via reflex arcs. These arcs involve sensory receptors, sensory neurons, the central nervous system, motor neurons, and effectors, enabling quick, automatic responses without conscious thought. Understanding the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord, is essential because it acts as the control center for processing sensory information and coordinating responses. The brain, especially areas like the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, integrates sensory input and orchestrates appropriate reactions. In summary, the mechanism of vision showcases how sensory reception in the eye translates into electrical signals that travel through neural pathways, processed by the CNS, resulting in our perception of the visual world. This interconnected system highlights the remarkable efficiency and complexity of our neural system in enabling us to see and interpret our environment. Welcome to this introduction slide. Here, I want to emphasize the importance of setting a strong foundation for our presentation. We'll start by clearly outlining the key points we'll cover, ensuring everyone stays on the same page. It's essential to communicate thoroughly, but in a conversational way, so the ideas come across naturally and engagingly. I'll highlight the most important concepts, making sure they stand out and resonate with you. Connecting these points to the overall theme helps create a cohesive narrative, reinforcing why this information matters and how it fits into the bigger picture. So, let's keep this introduction clear and engaging, setting the tone for the rest of our journey together. Now, in higher animals, including humans, we have developed two main systems for control, coordination, and integration. These are the nervous system and the endocrine system. The nervous system acts like an organized network of point-to-point connections, allowing for quick and precise neural coordination. Meanwhile, the endocrine system works through chemicals called hormones, providing a different kind of integration, more of a chemical communication that takes a bit more time but lasts longer. For example, when we do exercise, you might notice a significant increase in our respiration rate, heartbeat, blood flow, and sweating. These changes happen to meet the increased demands for nutrients and energy needed by our lungs, heart, muscles, and other organs. Essentially, during exercise, the functions of various organs are coordinated and integrated to support our activity. Now, let's clarify two important terms: coordination and integration. Coordination is when two or more organs interact and complement each other's functions. Integration, on the other hand, refers to making two or more organs work together as a unified, harmonious system. Our body has many organs, and none of them can work entirely on their own. To keep our body functioning normally, what we call homeostasis, the activities of these organs and organ systems must be well coordinated. This ensures everything works smoothly and in proper harmony to maintain our health and stability. Let's take a closer look at the neural system. This is the core network that controls how our body processes information and responds to it. When we talk about the neural system, we're really referring to the complex web of neurons and pathways that make up our nervous system. It includes the brain, spinal cord, and all the nerves that branch out throughout our body. The neural system is responsible for everything from basic reflexes to complex thought processes. It helps us perceive the world around us, make decisions, and coordinate actions. Understanding the neural system is crucial because it underpins all our behaviors and functions. It's what allows us to learn, remember, and adapt. So, as we move through this presentation, keep in mind that the neural system is really the foundation of how we interact with our environment and ourselves. Let's talk about invertebrates for a moment. They have a relatively simpler nervous system compared to vertebrates. This means their neural structures are less complex, which reflects their simpler body plans and behaviors. Now, the neural or nervous system is present in most multicellular animals, and its complexity tends to increase as we move from lower to higher animals. This system works by sending conclusions or signals to different organs, known as effectors, through motor nerves. These effectors then respond accordingly, allowing the organism to react appropriately to stimuli. At the core of the neural system are highly specialized cells called neurons. Sensory neurons play a crucial role. They detect and receive information from various sense organs, which are also called receptors. These receptors pick up stimuli from the environment, like touch, light, or sound, and then transmit this information to the central nervous system, or CNS, via sensory nerve fibers. Once the information reaches the CNS, it is processed, meaning the brain or spinal cord interprets the signals, and a conclusion is drawn. From there, the CNS sends out motor commands to effectors to produce the necessary response. So, in summary, the neural system acts as the control center of the body, integrating sensory input and coordinating appropriate motor responses through this complex, yet highly organized network of neurons. Let's take a closer look at the human neural system. This slide highlights some of the key aspects that make our nervous system so remarkable. First, the human neural system is incredibly complex, acting as the communication network of our body. It consists of the brain, spinal cord, and a vast network of nerves that extend throughout our body. These components work together to process information, control movements, and manage our internal functions. Understanding this system is essential because it underpins everything we do, from simple reflexes to complex thoughts and emotions. It's the foundation for how we perceive the world and respond to it. Throughout our presentation, we've been exploring how different systems interact, and the neural system is central to that, as it connects our sensory inputs with our motor outputs and cognitive processes. So, appreciating its structure and function helps us understand the broader picture of human physiology and behavior. Let's take a closer look at the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. It includes all the nerves in our body that are connected to the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain and spinal cord. The PNS acts like the communication network, transmitting information between the CNS and the rest of the body. Now, speaking of the CNS, this is the control center of our nervous system. It processes all the information we receive and coordinates our responses. The brain is responsible for higher functions like thinking and decision-making, while the spinal cord acts as a highway for signals traveling back and forth. It's interesting to note that both the PNS and CNS originate from the embryonic ectoderm, the early tissue layer in development. This foundation is crucial because it explains how our entire nervous system is structured from a common origin. When we talk about the human neural system, we're really describing a highly organized and efficient network that allows us to interact with and adapt to our environment. This division into the PNS and CNS helps us understand how different parts work together to keep us functioning smoothly. Now, let's look at how the nerve fibers of the peripheral nervous system are categorized. There are two main types, efferent fibers and afferent fibers. Efferent fibers are responsible for transmitting regulatory impulses from the central nervous system, or CNS, to the specific tissues or organs that need to respond. Think of them as the communication lines carrying commands from the brain and spinal cord to the rest of the body. On the other hand, afferent fibers work in the opposite direction. They carry impulses from tissues and organs back to the CNS, providing the brain with vital information about what's happening in the body. Understanding these two types of fibers is essential because they form the basis of how our nervous system coordinates responses and maintains homeostasis. Connecting this to the overall theme, these fibers are the pathways that enable effective communication between the CNS and peripheral tissues, ensuring our body responds appropriately to various stimuli. Let's take a closer look at the parasympathetic neural system. This is part of the autonomic neural system, which is responsible for transmitting impulses from the central nervous system to involuntary organs and smooth muscles throughout the body. Essentially, it helps regulate functions that we don't consciously control, like heart rate and digestion. Now, the autonomic neural system isn't just one unified entity. It's actually divided into two main parts, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic system is often associated with the fight or flight response, preparing the body for action, while the parasympathetic system, which we're focusing on now, promotes rest and digest. It helps calm the body down and conserve energy. It's also important to understand that the autonomic system is part of the broader peripheral nervous system, or PNS. The PNS is divided into these two divisions, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, each with distinct roles but working together to maintain balance. On the other hand, there's the somatic neural system, which differs because it relays impulses from the CNS directly to skeletal muscles, enabling voluntary movements. This distinction is crucial because it highlights how our nervous system manages both voluntary actions and involuntary processes seamlessly. So, connecting this all back to the overall theme, understanding these divisions helps us appreciate how complex and well-coordinated our nervous system is, maintaining homeostasis and responding appropriately to different situations. Let's take a closer look at the neuron. Neurons are the fundamental building blocks of our nervous system. They are specialized cells designed to transmit information throughout the body. Each neuron has a unique structure that allows it to send and receive signals efficiently. The key parts include the cell body, dendrites, and an axon. The cell body contains the nucleus and integrates incoming signals. Dendrites act like antennas, picking up messages from other neurons. The axon is like a long cable that carries the electrical impulse away from the cell body toward other neurons or muscles. Understanding how neurons work is essential because they form the basis of all our thoughts, feelings, and actions. They connect different parts of the brain and body, making communication across the nervous system possible. This interconnected network is what allows us to process information, learn, and respond to our environment. So, when we talk about the nervous system, we're really talking about an intricate web of billions of these tiny but powerful cells, neurons, that keep us functioning every day. Neurons are actually the longest cells in the entire human body. Imagine that. These tiny but incredibly long cells stretch out to connect different parts of your body and your brain. Our human neural system is quite remarkable, containing about 100 billion neurons. That's 100 billion individual cells working together to control everything we do. Most of these neurons are located in the brain, which makes sense since the brain is the command center for our body. Another important point is that once neurons are fully formed, they don't divide or multiply. They stay in what's called interphase, the resting phase, throughout our entire life. This is why, unlike many other cell types, neurons don't regenerate easily, which has big implications for brain injuries and neurodegenerative diseases. So, understanding these cells, their length, number, and how they behave, helps us appreciate just how complex and vital our neural system truly is. It's the foundation for everything from thinking to movement, and even our sense of self. Let's talk about the axon. The axon is typically a single, very long process that maintains a uniform thickness throughout. It originates from a specific part of the cell body called the axon hillock, which is actually the most sensitive part of the neuron. Inside the axon, you'll find neurofibrils and neurotubules, but interestingly, it does not contain Nissel's granules, cell organelles, or granular bodies. At the end of the axon, we have the distal part that branches out into a group called the terminal arborization, or axon terminals. When these terminal branches meet the dendrites of another neuron, they form a synapse. Each branch ends in a bulb-like structure known as a synaptic knob, which contains mitochondria and secretory vesicles filled with chemicals called neurotransmitters. The main function of the axon is to transmit nerve impulses away from the cell body, either toward a synapse or a neuromuscular junction. Now, moving on to dendrites. Dendrites are usually shorter, tapering processes that branch out from the cell body. They also contain Nissel's granules and can be one or several in number. Their primary role is to conduct nerve impulses toward the cell body, which is why they are called afferent or receiving processes. Finally, let's look at the cell body, also known as the cyton or soma. It resembles a typical cell, consisting of cytoplasm, a nucleus, and a cell membrane. The cytoplasm is packed with standard cell organelles like mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, rough endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, lysosomes, as well as granular bodies, neurofibrils, neurotubules, and Nissel's granules. The presence of neurofibrils and Nissel's granules is characteristic of all neurons. Neurofibrils play an important role in the transmission of impulses, helping to maintain the structure and function of the neuron. Now, let's take a closer look at the different types of axons. As we explore this, keep in mind how crucial axons are in transmitting signals throughout the nervous system. On this slide, we see that there are several key types, each with distinct characteristics. First, we have the myelinated axons, which are covered with a fatty layer called myelin. This myelin sheath acts like an insulator, allowing electrical impulses to travel much faster along these axons. This rapid transmission is essential for quick reflexes and efficient communication between neurons. Next, we have unmyelinated axons, which lack this insulating layer. As a result, signals move more slowly through these axons, but they still play vital roles in various neural functions. Then, there are also different structural classifications, such as the sensory, motor, and interneuronal axons, each serving specialized roles depending on the part of the nervous system they belong to. Understanding these variations helps us appreciate how the nervous system optimizes signal transmission for different functions, whether it's rapid reflex actions or more prolonged modulatory processes. So, recognizing the types of axons is a fundamental step in grasping how neural communication works at both the cellular and systemic levels. Now, let's look at the differences between non-myelinated and myelinated nerve fibers. In non-myelinated fibers, Schwann cells are present, but they don't form a myelin sheath around the axon. Instead, they simply surround the nerve fibers without creating those insulating layers. You'll notice that there are no nodes of Ranvier in these fibers. These non-myelinated fibers are typically found in both autonomous and somatic neural systems, where slower conduction is sufficient. On the other hand, in myelinated nerve fibers, Schwann cells play a different role. They form a myelin sheath around the axon, which acts as an insulating layer. This setup allows for much faster transmission of nerve impulses. The gaps between these myelin segments are called nodes of Ranvier, and these are crucial because they enable saltatory conduction, speeding up the signal travel. These myelinated fibers are mainly found in cranial and spinal nerves, where rapid communication is vital. So, in essence, the key difference lies in whether Schwann cells produce a myelin sheath and whether nodes of Ranvier are present. This distinction is fundamental to understanding how different nerve fibers function and adapt to their specific roles in the nervous system. Now, let's take a closer look at the different types of neurons. As you can see here, neurons are specialized cells that transmit information throughout our nervous system. The main types include sensory neurons, which are responsible for carrying signals from our sensory organs to the brain and spinal cord. Then, we have motor neurons that carry commands from the central nervous system to our muscles and glands, enabling actions. Interneurons are also crucial. They act as the connectors or messengers between sensory and motor neurons within the brain and spinal cord. Understanding these different neuron types helps us grasp how complex and efficient our nervous system truly is, especially as we explore how they work together to support our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Let's take a closer look at the different types of neurons based on their structure. First, we have unipolar neurons. These neurons have a cell body with just one axon, and they're typically found during the embryonic stage. They play a crucial role in early neural development. Next, we have bipolar neurons. These feature one dendrite and one axon, and they are mainly present in the retina of the eye. This specific structure is vital for transmitting sensory information related to vision. Finally, we have multipolar neurons. These are the most common type in the nervous system and are characterized by having several dendrites along with a single axon. You'll find them in the cerebral cortex, where they handle complex processing and integration of information. So, based on the number of axons and dendrites, neurons are divided into these three main types. Understanding these differences helps us grasp how neurons are specialized for different functions within the nervous system. Let's take a closer look at the properties of a neuron. First, neurons are specialized cells designed for communication. They have unique features that enable them to transmit information rapidly and efficiently throughout the body. One key property is excitability, meaning neurons can respond to stimuli and generate electrical signals called action potentials. This is essential for transmitting messages across the nervous system. Another important property is conductivity, which allows these electrical signals to travel along the neuron's length, from the dendrites all the way to the axon terminals. Additionally, neurons exhibit plasticity, meaning they can adapt and change in response to experiences or injuries. This adaptability is crucial for learning and memory. Together, these properties form the foundation for how neurons perform their vital role in processing and relaying information within our nervous system. Let's talk about two fundamental properties of neurons that are crucial for their function. First, conductivity. This is the ability of nerve cells to rapidly transmit an electrical impulse as a wave. Think of it like a quick, traveling signal that starts at one point and moves along the nerve fiber in a specific direction. This rapid transmission is essential for quick communication within the nervous system. Now, the second property is excitability. This refers to the nerve cell's capacity to generate an electrical impulse in response to a stimulus. When the neuron detects a stimulus, it alters the normal potential difference across its plasma membrane, creating an electrical response. This ability to respond to stimuli and produce impulses is what makes neurons so effective in processing and transmitting information. Connecting these concepts to the overall theme, both conductivity and excitability are vital for the proper functioning of the nervous system. They enable neurons to send signals efficiently and respond to changes in the environment, which is fundamental to how our body perceives and reacts to stimuli. Now, let's take a closer look at the functions of the neural system. Essentially, the neural system is responsible for coordinating and controlling all the activities of the body. It acts as the body's communication network, transmitting signals between different parts of the body and the brain. One of its key roles is to process sensory information from our environment, allowing us to perceive and respond appropriately. It also manages motor functions, enabling us to move and perform actions. Additionally, the neural system is vital for regulating internal processes like heart rate, digestion, and even emotional responses. Understanding these functions helps us appreciate how interconnected and efficient our bodies are, with the neural system serving as the central hub for maintaining overall balance and function. This ties directly into the broader theme of how our body systems work together seamlessly. The nervous system plays a crucial role in maintaining the body's internal environment, which we call homeostasis. This means it helps regulate conditions inside our body to keep everything stable and functioning properly. Additionally, the nervous system is responsible for storing impressions of previous stimuli. Basically, it keeps track of our experiences or memories. These stored memories can be recalled in the future, helping us learn and adapt based on past encounters. Furthermore, the nervous system controls and coordinates all parts of the body so they work together as a seamless, integrated unit. This coordination happens through three overlapping processes: sensory input, where it gathers information from our environment; integration, where it processes and interprets that information; and motor output, which involves responding or acting based on what has been processed. All these functions are essential because they enable the nervous system to serve its key roles, regulating internal conditions, storing memories, and ensuring smooth control and coordination of our body functions. This interconnected system keeps us balanced, responsive, and able to adapt to the world around us. Let's take a closer look at how nerve impulses are generated and conducted. When a nerve cell is stimulated, it creates an electrical signal known as an impulse. This process begins at the neuron's resting state, where the inside of the cell is negatively charged compared to the outside. When a stimulus reaches a certain threshold, sodium channels open, allowing sodium ions to rush into the cell. This influx causes a rapid change in electrical charge, known as depolarization. This depolarization then triggers nearby sodium channels to open, creating a chain reaction that propagates the impulse along the nerve fiber. As the impulse moves forward, potassium channels open, allowing potassium ions to exit the cell, which helps restore the resting potential in a process called repolarization. This cycle of depolarization and repolarization allows the nerve impulse to travel rapidly along the neuron. Understanding this process is key because it explains how signals are transmitted swiftly from your senses to your brain, enabling you to react quickly to your environment. The conduction of nerve impulses is truly a remarkable example of how electrical and chemical processes work together seamlessly within your nervous system. Now, let's explore how nerve impulses work. A nerve impulse is essentially a wave of bioelectric or electrochemical disturbance that travels along a neuron. Think of it as a message moving rapidly through the nervous system. This process is crucial because it allows neurons to communicate efficiently during the conduction of an excitation. When a neuron is activated, this wave of electrical change is generated at one point and then propagates along the entire length of the neuron. It's important to understand that this wave is what enables signals, such as sensory information or motor commands, to be transmitted throughout the body. So, in summary, the generation and conduction of nerve impulses are fundamental to how our nervous system functions, facilitating quick and precise communication within our bodies. Let's talk about how a nerve impulse is generated. Essentially, it's a temporary reversal of the resting potential within the neuron. Normally, the neuron maintains a stable electrical charge, but during impulse generation, that balance shifts briefly. This process involves osmotic equilibrium, meaning there's an electrical balance, what we call electrical equivalence, between the axoplasm inside the neuron and the extracellular fluid outside. This balance is crucial because it sets the stage for the nerve to respond properly. Another key factor is the permeability of the axon membrane, known as the axolma. When certain channels open, ions rush in and out, changing the electrical state of the neuron. Now, the ability of the impulse to travel along the nerve depends heavily on these factors, on the membrane's permeability and the osmotic balance. These elements work together to enable the conduction of nerve impulses, which is fundamental to how our nervous system functions. So, in essence, the process relies on a delicate interplay of electrical and chemical properties that allow signals to move efficiently along the neuron, ensuring proper communication within the nervous system. So, as a result, the outer surface of the axonal membrane carries a positive charge, while the inner surface becomes negatively charged, leading to what we call polarization. This difference in charge across the membrane creates an electrical potential, known as the resting potential. When the membrane is in this state, we refer to it as being polarized. Now, outside the axon, the fluid contains a low concentration of potassium ions, or K+, and a high concentration of sodium ions, Na+. This difference in ion concentrations forms what we call a concentration gradient. These ionic gradients are crucial because they are maintained by the sodium-potassium pump, which actively transports ions against their concentration gradients, pumping 3 sodium ions out and bringing in 2 potassium ions. Inside the axon, The fluid called axoplasm has a high concentration of potassium and negatively charged proteins, while sodium levels are low. All these factors together establish and maintain the resting potential, which is essential for the neuron's readiness to fire an impulse when needed. This polarization is fundamental to how nerve cells communicate and function properly. This process, known as reversal, repeats itself over and over again, allowing a nerve impulse to travel along the entire length of the neuron. At adjacent sites, like Site B, the membrane, specifically the axon, has a positive charge on the outer surface and a negative charge on the inner surface, which means it's still polarized. When a specific point on the outside of the membrane becomes negatively charged, it sends out an electrical current toward the neighboring positive point. This causes a flow of current on the outer surface from Site B to Site A. While on the inside, the current flows from Site A to Site B. The electrical potential difference across the membrane at Site A is what we call the action potential, or in other words, the nerve impulse. This process involves a rapid influx of sodium ions, Na+, which causes the reversal of polarity at that site. The outer surface of the membrane becomes negatively charged, and the inner surface becomes positively charged. Essentially, the membrane at Site A is depolarized. Its polarity is reversed. Now, when a stimulus of sufficient strength, called a threshold stimulus, is applied to a polarized membrane, it causes a significant increase in the membrane's permeability to Na+ ions at that specific point. Site A. This increase in permeability triggers the depolarization process, leading to the action potential. So, in summary, depolarization is a crucial part of nerve impulse conduction, enabling the rapid transmission of signals along neurons, which is fundamental to how our nervous system functions. A nerve impulse is transmitted from one neuron to another through junctions called synapses. These are formed by the membranes of a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron. This process explains why an impulse travels faster along a myelinated neuron compared to a non-myelinated one. In fact, it can be up to 50 times faster. When an impulse moves along a myelinated neuron, depolarization only happens at the nodes of Ranvier. The impulse effectively jumps from one node to the next, skipping over the myelin sheath. This jumping mechanism is called saltatory conduction, and it significantly speeds up nerve signal transmission. It's important to remember that until repolarization occurs, a neuron can't conduct another impulse. This recovery period is known as the refractory period. During this time, the neuron is resetting itself to its resting state. The rise in permeability to sodium ions, Na+, occurs very briefly when the neuron is stimulated. This is quickly followed by an increase in potassium permeability, K+. Within milliseconds, sodium influx stops, and potassium begins to exit the cell, restoring the original ionic balance. This process, called repolarization, brings the membrane back to its resting potential and makes the neuron ready to respond to new stimuli. Let's talk about synapses. These are really the tiny but mighty connections between neurons. They serve as the communication hubs where signals are transferred from one neuron to another. Think of them as the bridges that allow information to flow through the nervous system. At each synapse, the electrical or chemical signals are passed across a small gap called the synaptic cleft. This process is crucial because it enables us to think, feel, and move. Without synapses functioning properly, our neural networks would break down, and communication within the brain would come to a halt. Understanding synapses is key to grasping how the brain processes information, adapts through learning, and even how certain drugs or diseases can interfere with normal brain activity. So, these tiny structures are really at the heart of neural communication and overall brain function. So, on this slide, we're looking at the two main types of synapses. Now, synapses are the connections that allow neurons to communicate with each other, which is fundamental for everything our nervous system does. The slide mentions there are two types, and understanding these is key to grasping how signals are transmitted across the nervous system. We'll explore what these types are and how they differ, which helps us see the complexity and efficiency of neural communication. Remember, This is central to the overall theme of how our brain and body work together seamlessly. Electrical synapses are quite rare in our nervous system, but they do have specific places where they are found. You'll mostly see them in cardiac muscle fibers, smooth muscle fibers of the intestine, and the epithelial cells of the lens. Now, one of the key features of electrical synapses is that they allow for very rapid communication. Because the electrical current flows directly from one neuron to the next, there's very little delay, almost none at all. This makes impulse transmission across these synapses much faster than across chemical synapses. In fact, the way impulses move through electrical synapses is very similar to how they travel along a single axon. The membranes of the presynaptic and postsynaptic neurons are actually in very close contact, so close that they are almost continuous. This continuity is maintained by small protein structures called gap junctions, which form tiny channels between the two neurons. These gap junctions are crucial because they allow the electrical current to pass directly from one cell to another, ensuring quick and synchronized responses. So, in essence, electrical synapses enable rapid and almost seamless communication between neurons, which is especially important in tissues that need coordinated activity, like the heart. Now let's talk about the new potential that develops at the synapse. This potential can be either excitatory, which encourages the neuron to fire, or inhibitory, which makes it less likely to fire. When this potential occurs, it causes a change in the membrane potential of the postsynaptic membrane. Specifically, it opens ion channels, allowing sodium ions to enter the cell. This influx results in depolarization, which is a positive shift in the membrane potential, ultimately leading to the generation of an action potential in the postsynaptic neuron. In this way, the impulse is effectively transferred from one neuron to the next. Next, let's look at what happens during neurotransmitter release. The synaptic vesicles, which are tiny sacs containing neurotransmitters, fuse with the presynaptic plasma membrane, a process called exocytosis. This fusion causes the vesicles to rupture and discharge their contents into the synaptic cleft, the small gap between neurons. The neurotransmitters then bind to specific receptor proteins on the postsynaptic membrane, initiating the response we just discussed. When an action potential reaches the presynaptic knob, calcium ions from the extracellular space enter the neuron's cytoplasm. These calcium ions are crucial because they trigger the movement of the synaptic vesicles toward the surface of the presynaptic membrane. This movement prepares the vesicles for fusion and neurotransmitter release. Finally, it's important to remember that the pre- and postsynaptic neurons are separated by this fluid-filled space called the synaptic cleft. This gap is essential for the chemical transmission process, allowing neurotransmitters to bridge the space and facilitate communication between neurons. And that's the core process of chemical synapses, a beautifully coordinated system of electrical and chemical signals working together to ensure our nervous system functions smoothly. Let's take a closer look at the human nervous system. This system is essentially the control center of the body, responsible for coordinating all our actions and responses. It consists of two main parts: the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, made up of nerves that branch out to the rest of the body. The central nervous system processes information and makes decisions, while the peripheral nervous system carries signals to and from different parts of the body. These signals allow us to feel sensations, move muscles, and even regulate internal functions like heartbeat and digestion. Understanding how the nervous system works is crucial because it highlights how interconnected all our bodily functions are. It's the foundation that supports everything from simple reflexes to complex thought processes, tying into the broader theme of how our bodies maintain balance and respond to the environment. So moving on to slide 33, let's take a closer look at the human nervous system. It's divided into two main parts: the central nervous system, or CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. The CNS is basically the control center, comprising the brain and spinal cord, where all the processing and decision-making happen. On the other hand, the PNS includes all the nerves that branch out from the spinal cord and reach the rest of the body. Its main role is to connect the CNS to the limbs and organs, allowing us to sense the environment and respond accordingly. Together, these systems work seamlessly to keep us functioning, reacting, and adapting to everything around us. This division is fundamental to understanding how our nervous system operates as a whole. Let's take a closer look at the central nervous system, or CNS. This is essentially the control center of our body, responsible for processing information and coordinating responses. It consists mainly of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain, as you know, manages functions like thinking, memory, emotions, and sensory processing. The spinal cord acts as a communication highway, transmitting signals between the brain and the rest of the body. Understanding the CNS is crucial because it plays such a vital role in everything we do, from simple movements to complex decision-making. It ties into our overall theme of how the nervous system integrates and controls bodily functions, ensuring everything works harmoniously. The central nervous system, or CNS, is essentially the integrating and command center of our entire nervous system. It consists of two main parts, the brain and the spinal cord. These structures work together to process information, make decisions, and coordinate responses. The brain is responsible for higher functions like thinking, memory, and emotions, while the spinal cord acts as the main communication highway, transmitting signals between the brain and the rest of the body. Understanding the CNS is crucial because it forms the core of how our nervous system controls and integrates all our bodily functions, connecting all the dots to keep us functioning smoothly. Now, let's take a closer look at the many vital functions of the brain. It is not only the site for processing our senses like vision, hearing, and speech, but also for memory, intelligence, emotions, and our thoughts. Essentially, it's the control center for how we perceive and respond to the world around us. The brain also regulates critical survival functions such as thermoregulation, hunger, and thirst, ensuring our body maintains a stable internal environment. Additionally, it influences the activity of several endocrine glands, which affect human behavior and various physiological processes. Beyond that, the brain controls the functioning of vital involuntary organs like the lungs, heart, and kidneys, keeping them working smoothly without conscious effort. It also manages our circadian rhythms, which follow a 24-hour cycle, helping regulate sleep-wake patterns and other daily biological processes. Furthermore, the brain coordinates voluntary movements and maintains our balance, enabling us to navigate and interact with our environment effectively. At its core, the brain is the central information processing organ, our command and control system. It orchestrates a vast array of activities that keep us alive, functioning, and adaptive to the world around us. The brain is the anterior-most part of the central nervous system, which means it's located at the front end of the entire system. It's situated within the cranium, or what we commonly refer to as the skull's cranial cavity. So, essentially, the brain sits inside the skull, protected by the bony structure. This placement is crucial because it offers protection and support, allowing the brain to carry out its vital functions. Understanding the location helps us appreciate how the brain is well guarded and integrated into the overall structure of the nervous system, serving as the control center for thoughts, emotions, and motor functions. The human brain typically weighs between 1,200 and 1,400 grams, which is roughly about 3 pounds. Despite its relatively small size, it contains around 100 billion neurons, the fundamental units of our nervous system, with most of these neurons located in the brain itself. When we look at the structure of the brain, it's divided into 3 main parts: the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Each of these regions plays a crucial role in controlling different functions and processes. Now, to protect this vital organ, the brain is covered by 3 membranes called meninges. The innermost membrane is the pyometer, which is exceptionally thin and delicate. It's directly in contact with the brain tissue itself, serving as a sort of gentle layer hugging the brain. Surrounding that is the arachnoid mater, which is a very thin, web-like layer that acts as a cushioning barrier. The outermost layer is the duramater, which is much tougher, fibrous, and durable, adhering closely to the inner surface of the skull. These three membranes, collectively known as the cranial meninges, are essential for protecting the brain against injury and infection. They serve as a protective covering, much like a helmet, but also help contain the cerebrospinal fluid that cushions and nourishes the brain. Understanding this layered protection highlights just how carefully our brain is safeguarded, emphasizing its importance in overall health and function. Let's take a closer look at the forebrain. As you can see here, the forebrain is a crucial part of the brain's structure. It includes some of the most complex and advanced regions, like the cerebrum, which is responsible for higher cognitive functions such as thinking, problem-solving, and decision-making. The forebrain also encompasses structures like the thalamus and hypothalamus, which play key roles in sensory processing and regulating vital functions like hunger, thirst, and body temperature. What's really interesting is how these areas work together to influence our behaviors and emotions, linking physical processes to our mental states. This region is often considered the seat of consciousness and personality, connecting tightly with the overall theme of understanding brain functions and how they shape our interactions with the world. So, in essence, the forebrain is what makes us uniquely human. Our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions all originate here. The cerebral cortex is greatly folded, which increases its surface area and allows for more neurons. These folds consist of upward ridges called gyri and downward grooves known as sulci. Beneath the gray matter of the cortex, there are millions of metallated nerve fibers, which form the inner part of the cerebral hemisphere. This concentration of nerve fibers gives this inner tissue an opaque white appearance, which is why we call it the white matter. The cerebrum itself is the largest and most complex part of the human brain. It is divided longitudinally into two halves, the left and right cerebral hemispheres, by a deep cleft. These hemispheres are connected by a large bundle of myelinated fibers called the corpus callosum. The outer layer of the cerebrum is known as the cerebral cortex, which appears grayish because it contains a high density of neuron cell bodies. Moving to the anterior part of the brain, we find a pair of short, club-shaped structures called the olfactory lobes, which are primarily responsible for our sense of smell. These components together form the forebrain, the most advanced part of our brain involved in complex functions like thinking, memory, and sensory processing. Let's take a closer look at the association areas. These are large regions in the brain that aren't specifically dedicated to sensory or motor functions. Instead, their main role is to interpret the inputs we receive, store that information, and even initiate responses based on past experiences. Essentially, they help us with complex functions like memory, learning, reasoning, and making sense of different sensory inputs together. Now, moving on to sensory and motor areas. Sensory areas are responsible for receiving impulses from receptors, which are basically our body's way of sensing the environment. Motor areas, on the other hand, send impulses out to effectors, like muscles or glands, to produce a response. Within each cerebral hemisphere, there are three main types of junctional areas that connect different parts of the brain, allowing for communication and coordination. And if we look at the overall structure, a very deep and prominent fissure, called the longitudinal fissure, separates the two cerebral hemispheres. Each hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital, each with specialized functions that contribute to our overall brain activity. Understanding these divisions and regions helps us appreciate how complex and integrated our brain functions truly are. Now, let's take a closer look at the inner parts of the cerebral hemispheres and some of the deep structures associated with them. These include areas like the amygdala and the hippocampus, which together form what's known as the limbic system or limbic lobe. This system is really important because it helps regulate our sexual behavior, controls how we express emotions like excitement, pleasure, rage, and fear, and also influences our motivation. Moving deeper, we find the hypothalamus, which is located at the base of the thalamus. The hypothalamus is like a command center for many vital functions. it contains centers that regulate body temperature, and it also controls our urges for eating and drinking. Plus, it houses groups of neurosecretory cells that produce hormones known as hypothalamic hormones, which play a crucial role in maintaining homeostasis. Now, wrapping around the hypothalamus is the cerebrum. Think of it as the big, outer part of the brain that covers and protects the structures underneath. The cerebrum acts as a major hub for coordinating sensory information and motor signals, making sure everything works smoothly together. Finally, let's touch on the epithalamus. It's a thin layer of non-nervous tissue situated at the posterior part of the diencephalon. While it might seem small, it has important functions related to the regulation of our biological rhythms and connects with other parts of the brain involved in mood and alertness. All these parts, the limbic system, hypothalamus, cerebrum, and epithalamus, are essential components of the forebrain. They work together to regulate our behavior, emotional responses, and basic life functions, forming the foundation of how our brain manages both our physical needs and our emotional life. Now, let's turn our attention to the midbrain and hindbrain, which are crucial parts of the brainstem. The midbrain acts as a relay station, processing information between the brain and the spinal cord, and it also plays a role in functions like vision, hearing, and motor control. Moving down, the hindbrain is really the foundation of our basic life functions. It includes structures like the cerebellum, which is vital for coordination and balance, and the medulla, which controls vital automatic functions such as heartbeat and respiration. These regions are fundamental for our survival, supporting everything from movement to essential autonomic processes. Understanding these areas helps us see how the brain manages both complex behaviors and the essential functions that keep us alive. The midbrain is a crucial part of the brain's structure, situated between the thalamus and hypothalamus of the forebrain, and just above the pons in the hindbrain. One interesting feature is the cerebral aqueduct, a canal that runs right through the midbrain, connecting the third and fourth ventricles and allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow. When we look at the dorsal, or upper, part of the midbrain, we find it mainly composed of two pairs of rounded swellings called the corpora quadrigemina. These four lobes play a significant role in visual and auditory processing, helping us coordinate sensory information with motor responses. Understanding the midbrain's placement and structure helps us appreciate how it acts as a relay station, connecting different parts of the brain and contributing to our sensory and motor functions, which ties into the overall theme of how the brain integrates and processes information. The medulla oblongata is a crucial part of our brain, and it's directly connected to the spinal cord. It contains vital centers that control essential functions like respiration, which is our breathing, cardiovascular reflexes such as heart rate and blood pressure, and even gastric secretions that help with digestion. It's interesting to note that the medulla is the second largest part of the human brain, often called the little cerebrum because of its size. Its surface is highly convoluted, meaning it has many folds and grooves. This convoluted surface actually provides more space for neurons, allowing for complex processing and control. Now, if we look at the cranial nerves, which are nerves that emerge directly from the brain, 10 out of the 12 pairs originate from the brainstem, highlighting how important this area is for connecting the brain to the rest of the body. Moving on, the cerebellum is another key component. Although not part of the medulla, it's closely related and works alongside it to coordinate movement, balance, and posture. And then we have the brainstem, which is formed by the midbrain and hindbrain. It's the posterior part of the brain that continues downward to connect with the spinal cord. The brainstem contains fiber tracts that serve as communication pathways, interconnecting different regions of the brain. Specifically, the pons is a part of the hindbrain and acts as a bridge, hence the name, connecting different parts of the brain and facilitating communication between the cerebellum and the cerebrum. Altogether, the hindbrain encompasses these structures, the medulla, pons, and cerebellum, that are fundamental in controlling many involuntary functions and coordinating our movements. This interconnected system is essential for maintaining our body's homeostasis and ensuring smooth operation of vital functions. Let's take a closer look at the spinal cord, which is a crucial part of our central nervous system. The spinal cord acts as a communication highway between the brain and the rest of the body, transmitting sensory information from our body to the brain and motor commands from the brain to our muscles. It's housed within the vertebral column, providing both protection and support. The spinal cord is segmented, with each segment giving rise to a pair of spinal nerves that exit the spinal cord and branch out to different parts of the body. It's important to understand that the spinal cord isn't just a bundle of nerves. It also contains neural circuits that coordinate reflexes and simple motor patterns. Recognizing the structure and function of the spinal cord helps us appreciate how our nervous system maintains seamless communication and control throughout our body. This understanding ties into the overall theme of how the nervous system integrates and manages complex bodily functions efficiently. The spinal cord plays a crucial role in our nervous system, acting as a communication highway between the brain and the rest of the body. It conducts impulses to and from the brain, which is essential for sensory information to reach the brain and for motor commands to be sent out to our muscles. Additionally, it controls most reflex activities, those quick, automatic responses we have to certain stimuli, and provides a vital link between the spinal nerves and the brain, ensuring seamless communication. When we look at the pathways within the spinal cord, we see that the nerve tracts are divided into two main types. The ascending tracts carry sensory impulses upward toward the brain, allowing us to sense pain, temperature, and touch. Conversely, the descending tracts carry motor impulses downward from the brain, which control our voluntary and involuntary movements. Structurally, the spinal cord is made up of gray matter, which contains nerve cell bodies, and white matter, which surrounds the gray matter and consists of groups of myelinated axons. These myelinated fibers are essential for rapid signal transmission. It's important to understand that the spinal cord itself is a specialized tissue composed of these two types, gray and white matter, working together to facilitate communication within the nervous system. It forms the posterior part of the central nervous system and runs along the mid-dorsal aspect within the vertebral column's neural canal. In an adult, the spinal cord is typically about 42 to 45 centimeters long, though its diameter varies at different levels, reflecting the different amounts of gray and white matter needed for various functions. This variation helps accommodate the diverse demands placed on different segments of the spinal cord, highlighting its vital role in our body's overall function and coordination. Let's talk about reflex action and the reflex arc. These are fascinating processes that happen very quickly in our bodies. When we encounter a stimulus, like touching something hot, a reflex action kicks in almost instantly to protect us. This is what we call a reflex action, an automatic, involuntary response. Now, the pathway that this information follows is known as the reflex arc. It involves a direct route from the sensory receptor, which detects the stimulus, to the spinal cord, and then to the effector like a muscle that responds. The key point here is that reflex actions happen without involving the brain directly, which makes them incredibly fast. This rapid response helps us avoid injury and maintain safety without having to think about it consciously. Understanding the reflex arc is important because it highlights how our nervous system is designed for quick reactions, connecting to the overall theme of how our body protects itself and maintains homeostasis. Now, let's talk about the entire process that occurs when our body responds to a peripheral nervous stimulation. This process happens involuntarily, meaning it happens without us consciously thinking about it or putting in any effort. It's a quick, automatic response that involves a part of our central nervous system. We call this a reflex action. A key concept here is the reflex arc, which is the nerve pathway that the impulses travel along during this reflex. The reflex arc includes the sensory receptor, the sensory neuron, the central nervous system, usually the spinal cord, and then the motor neuron, which sends the response to the muscle or gland. Understanding reflex actions and reflex arcs helps us appreciate how our body protects us and maintains balance without us needing to think about it. It's a fundamental part of how our nervous system keeps us safe and functioning smoothly. These are acquired after birth, meaning they develop over our lifetime through experience and interaction with our environment. For example, if you touch something extremely hot, cold, or pointed, or encounter a scary or poisonous animal, your body might react by withdrawing that body part. This kind of response is a learned or acquired reflex, shaped by our experiences. Now, moving on to conditioned reflexes. These are inborn, innate responses that we inherit genetically. Think of basic acts like breastfeeding and swallowing. These are automatic, natural responses that don't need to be learned. Reflexes, as a whole, are generally categorized into two types: acquired or conditioned reflexes and unconditioned reflexes. Understanding these helps us see how our behaviors are influenced both by our genetics and our experiences, tying into the overall theme of how humans develop and adapt throughout life. Let's take a closer look at the mechanism of reflex action. Reflex actions are rapid, automatic responses to stimuli, which are crucial for protecting our body from harm. When a stimulus is detected, sensory receptors in the skin or other tissues send signals through sensory neurons to the spinal cord. This is the key point. These signals are transmitted very quickly via the sensory neurons. Once the signal reaches the spinal cord, it's processed almost instantly. Here, interneurons come into play. They act as messengers, relaying the information from sensory neurons to motor neurons. The motor neurons then carry the response signal away from the spinal cord back to the muscles or glands. This entire process happens without the involvement of the brain, which is why reflex actions are so fast. The primary purpose is to provide an immediate response to potentially harmful stimuli, like pulling your hand away from a hot surface. Understanding this mechanism highlights how our nervous system is wired for quick, automatic reactions, an essential part of our overall survival and safety. Now let's talk about the efferent neuron. This neuron carries signals from the central nervous system, or CNS, out to the effector, which could be a muscle or a gland. Essentially, it acts as the messenger that tells the body how to respond. When we think about reflexes, like the knee-jerk reflex, this pathway is crucial. The stimulus, which is detected by sensory receptors, triggers a response that travels through this reflex arc. The afferent neuron, on the other hand, is responsible for receiving that initial signal from a sensory organ, say, the skin or muscle, and transmitting it into the CNS via the dorsal nerve root, which is located in the spinal cord. So the entire reflex pathway includes at least one afferent neuron and one efferent neuron, arranged in a series. The afferent neuron picks up the signal, sends it into the spinal cord, and then the efferent neuron carries the response back out to produce the action. This mechanism of reflex action is a great example of how our body can respond very quickly and automatically to certain stimuli, without us even thinking about it. It's a fundamental part of how our nervous system maintains safety and stability. Let's talk about sensory reception and processing. This is a fundamental part of how we perceive the world around us. Essentially, sensory reception involves the detection of stimuli, like light, sound, touch, taste, or smell, by specialized sensory receptors. These receptors are like the body's way of translating external stimuli into electrical signals. Once these signals are generated, they are sent to the brain through different pathways, a process known as sensory processing. This is where the brain interprets the signals, allowing us to recognize what we're experiencing, whether it's the warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, or the sound of music. Understanding this process highlights how our sensory systems are intricately designed to gather information efficiently and help us respond appropriately to our environment. This is crucial not only for everyday functioning, but also for understanding sensory disorders and how they affect perception. In the context of this presentation, recognizing the flow from reception to processing underscores the importance of sensory integration in overall perception and behavior. Now, when we look at the most complex sensory receptors, we see that they are made up of many different parts. These include sense cells, sensory neurons, and various accessory structures that support their function. For example, take the eye, which is our sensory organ for vision, and the ear, which is responsible for hearing. Both of these organs are highly specialized and contain numerous components working together to detect environmental stimuli. These sensory organs, or receptors, play a crucial role in helping us perceive the world around us. They detect all kinds of changes, like light, sound, temperature, and pressure, and then convert those changes into signals. These signals are then sent to the central nervous system, or CNS, where they are processed and analyzed. Think of the CNS as the control center that interprets what our sensory organs are telling us. Once the signals are processed, appropriate responses are generated, and signals are sent to different areas of the brain. This entire process, sensory reception and processing, is fundamental to how we perceive, interpret, and react to our environment. It ties directly into the overall theme of how our nervous system enables us to interact effectively with the world around us. Let's take a closer look at the eye, which is a fascinating and complex organ. The number 19 here highlights its significance in our overall sensory system. The eye is responsible for capturing light and converting it into electrical signals that our brain can interpret as images. It's a marvel of biological engineering, allowing us to see and understand the world around us. Throughout this presentation, we've emphasized how vital sensory organs are to perception and interaction. The eye, in particular, plays a crucial role, connecting us visually to our environment. Its intricate structure, from the cornea and lens to the retina, enables us to perceive depth, color, and motion. Recognizing the importance of the eye reminds us of how essential sensory input is to our daily experiences and decision-making processes. The organ of sight in humans is, quite simply, a pair of eyes. These remarkable organs are essential for how we perceive the world around us. They allow us to see colors, shapes, movement, and depth, helping us navigate our environment safely and effectively. When we think about vision, it's important to remember that our eyes are not just passive receivers. They are highly complex and sensitive organs that work closely with our brain to interpret what we see. This connection is fundamental to understanding how our sensory system functions as a whole, which ties back to the overall theme of how our senses help us interact with and understand the world. The eyes are located in these deep, protective bony cavities known as the orbits, or eye sockets, of the skull. These orbits serve as a secure housing for the eyes, shielding them from injury while allowing for a wide range of movement. Their position is crucial because it provides not only protection, but also support for the delicate structures involved in vision. Understanding the orbits helps us appreciate how the eyes stay protected within the skull, which is a key aspect of the overall anatomy of the sensory system. This positioning plays a vital role in how we perceive and react to our environment, emphasizing the importance of the skull's structure in protecting our sense of sight. Let's take a closer look at the structure of the eye. The innermost layer is the retina, which is crucial because it contains the light-sensitive cells that convert light into nerve signals. Moving outward, we have the middle layer, made up of the choroid, ciliary body, and iris. These parts work together to provide nutrients, control the shape of the lens, and regulate how much light enters the eye. Then, on the outermost layer, you'll find the sclera and cornea. The sclera is the tough, protective white part, while the cornea is the transparent front that allows light to pass through and begin the process of vision. Overall, the adult human eyeball is nearly spherical, composed of these three concentric layers, each playing a vital role in how we see and interpret the world around us. Let's take a closer look at the cornea. It's the thin, transparent front part of the sclera that you see here. Although it's transparent, it actually lacks blood vessels, which is quite interesting. Instead, it's rich in nerve endings, making it highly sensitive to touch and stimuli. This feature is essential because it helps us protect our eyes from potential injuries and irritations. The cornea plays a crucial role in focusing light onto the retina, which is vital for clear vision. Now, moving on to the sclera, which is the opaque, outermost covering of the eyeball. It's made of dense connective tissue, giving it strength and structure. The sclera's main job is to maintain the shape of the eyeball and provide a protective layer around all the inner structures. Think of it as the eye's tough shell, safeguarding the delicate components inside. Understanding these outer layers helps us appreciate how our eyes are designed to both protect and focus, key themes that run throughout our study of ocular anatomy. Let's start by looking at the iris. It forms a pigmented circle of muscular tissue that's attached to the ciliary body in front of the lens. The color of the iris is due to its pigment, and that pigment actually gives the eye its characteristic color. The muscles within the iris are responsible for controlling the size of the pupil, which is the opening in the center. When these muscle fibers contract or relax, they regulate how much light enters the eye by changing the pupil's diameter. Moving inward, the eyeball contains a transparent, crystalline structure known as the lens. The ciliary body holds this lens in its proper position. Interestingly, by stretching or relaxing the ciliary body, the eye can change the shape of the lens. This process, called accommodation, allows us to focus on objects at different distances, whether we're looking at something close up or far away. Now let's talk about the choroid. It's a layer with a bluish pigmentation located beneath the sclera, which is the white outer layer of the eye. The choroid is rich in blood vessels, and these vessels play a crucial role in nourishing the retina, which is essential for detecting light and forming visual images. So these layers, iris, lens, and choroid, are all integral parts of the middle layer of the eye, working together to facilitate vision by controlling light entry, focusing images, and nourishing the delicate tissues inside the eye. Now let's discuss the types of photoreceptors or visual cells in the eye. There are two main types: rods, also called rod cells, and cones, known as cone cells. Both of these cell types contain light-sensitive proteins called photopigments, which are crucial for detecting light. Moving on, the cones are primarily responsible for daylight, or photopic, vision, as well as color vision. There are 3 types of cones, each with unique photopigments that respond to specific wavelengths: red, green, and blue light. The fascinating part is that our perception of different colors arises from the combination of signals from these 3 types of cones. When all are equally stimulated, our brain perceives white light. Now, regarding twilight or scotopic vision, this function is mainly handled by the rods. These cells contain a special protein called rhodopsin, often referred to as visual purple, which is sensitive to low-light conditions. Rhodopsin is a derivative of vitamin A, highlighting the importance of vitamin A in visual processes. Finally, let's look at the structure of the retina, which is the innermost layer of the eye. The retina is composed of 3 layers of cells arranged from inside to outside. The innermost layer contains ganglion cells, then bipolar cells, and the outermost layer has the photoreceptor cells, rods, and cones. This layered arrangement is essential for processing visual information efficiently as it travels from the photoreceptors to the brain. The optic nerves are connected with the brain, serving as the crucial communication link between our eyes and our visual processing centers. These nerves exit the eyeball at a specific point, where the retinal blood vessels also enter. This entry point is located medial to and slightly above the posterior pole of the eyeball. It's important to note that in this region, there are no photoreceptor cells, which are the rods and cones responsible for detecting light and color. Because of this absence, this area is known as the blind spot, as no image can be formed there. Understanding this connection helps us appreciate how visual information is transmitted, and also why our vision has this natural blind spot that our brain seamlessly compensates for. This ties into the overall theme of how complex and efficient our visual system is, despite some inherent limitations. At the posterior pole of the eye, just lateral to the blind spot, we find a small, oval-shaped area of the retina that appears yellowish. This area is called the macula lutea, or sometimes referred to as the yellow spot. Right at its center, there's a shallow depression known as the fovea centralis, or simply the fovea. The fovea is a specialized part of the retina where the tissue is thinned out, and it contains a dense concentration of cone cells. This high density of cones is what allows us to have the greatest visual acuity, or resolution at this point. Essentially, the macula lutea and the fovea work together to give us sharp, detailed vision in the center of our visual field, which is crucial for activities like reading, recognizing faces, or any task requiring fine detail. Connecting this to the overall theme, these structures highlight how the eye is beautifully adapted to provide us with precise and detailed vision in the most important part of our field of view. Let's take a closer look at the internal structure of the eye. The space between the lens and the retina is known as the vitreous chamber. This area is filled with a transparent gel called vitreous humor. This gel helps maintain the eye's shape and provides a clear pathway for light to reach the retina. Moving forward, the space between the cornea and the lens is called the aqueous chamber. It contains a thin, watery fluid known as aqueous humor, which also plays a crucial role in nourishing the eye and maintaining proper intraocular pressure. Understanding these components highlights how the eye is perfectly designed to focus light and produce clear images. These fluids and chambers work together seamlessly to support vision, aligning with our overall theme of understanding how the eye functions as a complex, yet efficient, optical system. Now, let's delve into the mechanism of vision. This slide highlights how our eyes and brain work together to turn light into the images we see every day. First, light enters the eye through the cornea, which helps to focus it. Then, it passes through the pupil, which adjusts in size to control how much light gets in. Behind the pupil is the lens, which fine-tunes the focus onto the retina at the back of the eye. The retina is packed with photoreceptor cells, rods, and cones that detect light and color. These cells convert light signals into electrical impulses that are transmitted via the optic nerve to the brain. The brain then processes these signals, allowing us to interpret and understand what we're seeing. This entire process is incredibly fast and precise, enabling us to perceive the world in real time. Understanding this mechanism is crucial because it highlights how complex and finely tuned our visual system truly is, which ties into the overall importance of sensory processing in our perception of reality. In the brain, neural impulses are analyzed, and the image formed on the retina is recognized based on our previous memory and experience. These impulses, known as action potentials, are transmitted by the optic nerves to the visual cortex of the brain for processing. As a result, potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells, producing signals that then activate the ganglion cells through the bipolar cells. When light hits the retina, it causes the dissociation of retinal from opsin, leading to structural changes in the opsin protein. This change affects the permeability of the cell membrane, which is crucial for generating the electrical signals that our brain interprets as visual information. The photosensitive compounds in our eyes, called photopigments, are made up of opsin, a protein, and retinal, which is an aldehyde derived from vitamin A. These pigments are essential for capturing light and converting it into electrical signals. Light enters the eye through the cornea and lens, focusing the rays onto the retina, where they stimulate the rods and cones. These cells then generate impulses that travel along the optic nerve to be processed by the brain. And an important aspect of human vision is that we have binocular vision, meaning both eyes focus on the same object. This gives us a sense of depth and helps us perceive the world in 3 dimensions, which is fundamental to how we interact with our environment. Let's take a closer look at the ear, which is designated as slide 21 in our presentation. The ear plays a crucial role in our sensory system, primarily responsible for hearing and balance. It may look simple on the outside, but inside, it has a complex structure that allows us to perceive sound and maintain our equilibrium. The outer part of the ear, called the pinna, helps collect sound waves from the environment. These waves then travel through the ear canal to reach the eardrum. The eardrum vibrates in response to these sound waves, converting them into mechanical movements. These vibrations are transferred to the middle ear, which contains tiny bones known as ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes. These bones amplify the vibrations and pass them to the inner ear. The inner ear, or cochlea, is where the magic of hearing happens. It contains fluid and tiny hair cells that convert the mechanical vibrations into electrical signals. These signals are then sent to the brain via the auditory nerve, allowing us to interpret and understand sounds. Additionally, the inner ear also contains structures called semicircular canals, which help us maintain balance and spatial orientation. So the ear is not just about hearing. It's also vital for our sense of balance and coordination, linking closely to the overall theme of sensory and neurological health. Understanding its structure and function helps us appreciate how integral this organ is to daily life. The ears are a fascinating pair of organs that serve two main purposes. They are known as stadioacoustic organs, which means they are designed for both sensory functions, specifically hearing and maintaining our body balance. When we think about hearing, we often focus on how we perceive sounds, but the ears also play a crucial role in helping us stay oriented and balanced in our environment. This dual function highlights how interconnected our sensory systems are. So, in essence, the ears are not just for listening. They are vital for helping us stay upright and aware of our position in space. This connection to balance really underscores the importance of the ears in our overall sensory network. The ears are positioned on the sides of the head, which is quite typical for many mammals. In most cases, the ear is actually a flap of tissue, and this part is also known as the pinna. The pinna plays a crucial role in the auditory system because it helps collect and funnel sound waves into the ear canal. Understanding the position and structure of the ears helps us appreciate how animals perceive their environment and locate sounds, which is essential for their survival and communication. This concept ties into the overall theme of how sensory organs are adapted to meet the specific needs of different species. Let's take a closer look at the inner ear. It consists of a labyrinth of fluid-filled chambers located within the temporal bone of the skull. The labyrinth itself is made up of two main parts, the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. The bony labyrinth is essentially a series of channels carved into the bone. Inside these channels, you'll find the membranous labyrinth, which is surrounded by a fluid called perilymph. The membranous labyrinth, in turn, is filled with a different fluid called endolymph. Now, a key structure within the labyrinth is the cochlea, which is the coiled portion that plays a critical role in hearing. The membranes forming the cochlea, specifically the Reissner's membrane and the basilar membrane, divide the bony labyrinth into two large channels, the upper vestibular canal, also known as the scala vestibuli, and the lower tympanic canal, called the scala tympani. At the base of the cochlea, the scala vestibuli ends at the oval window, while the scala tympani terminates at the round window, which opens into the middle ear. Between these two canals is a small duct called the scala media, or cochlear duct, which contains endolymph. The vestibular and tympanic canals are filled with perilymph, providing the necessary fluid environment for sound transmission, while the cochlear duct contains endolymph, which is vital for sensory transduction. Moving to the middle ear, it contains three tiny bones called ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes, often referred to as the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. These bones are connected in a chain-like fashion and work together to amplify sound vibrations. The malleus attaches to the tympanic membrane, or eardrum, which vibrates when sound waves hit it. The stapes is connected to the oval window of the cochlea, transmitting vibrations into the inner ear. These ossicles significantly improve the efficiency of sound transmission. The middle ear also connects to the pharynx via the eustachian tube. This tube helps equalize pressure on both sides of the eardrum, which is important for proper hearing, and also allows you to pop your ears when changing altitude. Finally, let's briefly touch on the external ear. It consists of the pinna and the auditory canal, or external auditory meatus. The pinna helps collect sound waves and direct them inward. The auditory canal then channels these waves toward the tympanic membrane. Inside the canal, you'll find tiny hairs and wax-secreting glands that help protect the ear from debris and infection. The tympanic membrane, or eardrum, is a thin layer of tissue that separates the outer ear from the middle ear. It's covered with skin on the outside and mucous membrane on the inside, and it vibrates in response to sound waves, initiating the process that leads to hearing. Overall, the mammalian ear can be divided into three major sections: the outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear, each playing a vital role in capturing, transmitting, and processing sound. Let's take a closer look at the organ of Corti, which is essentially the core of our auditory system. On the apical part of each hair cell, you'll notice a large number of tiny projections called stereocilia. These are crucial for translating sound vibrations into electrical signals. Just above these hair cells, there's a delicate, elastic membrane known as the tectorial membrane. It plays a key role in stimulating the stereocilia when sound waves cause movement within the cochlea. Now, beneath the hair cells lies the basilar membrane, which forms the floor of the cochlear duct. This is where the organ of Corti sits. The organ of Corti is the actual sensory organ for hearing, containing mechanoreceptors that detect sound vibrations. The hair cells are arranged in rows along the internal side of the organ, acting as the primary auditory receptors. Importantly, the basal end of each hair cell is in close contact with afferent nerve fibers, which carry the electrical signals generated by the hair cells directly to the brain. This close contact ensures that sound information is transmitted efficiently. Overall, the organ of Corti is a beautifully organized structure that converts mechanical sound waves into neural signals, allowing us to perceive and interpret the sounds around us. Let's take a closer look at the vestibular apparatus. The saccule and utricle each contain a projecting ridge called the macula. These structures are key players in detecting linear acceleration and head position relative to gravity. The crista and macula are the specific receptors within the vestibular system that are responsible for maintaining our balance and posture, helping us stay upright and coordinated. Now, each semicircular canal is oriented in a different plane, at right angles to each other, which allows us to detect rotational movements in any direction. These membranous canals are suspended within the perilymph of the bony canals, providing a fluid-filled environment essential for their function. At the base of each canal, you'll find a swelling called the ampulla, which houses a projecting ridge known as the crista ampullaris. This crista contains hair cells that are sensitive to movement. Overall, the vestibular apparatus is a complex yet beautifully organized system located above the cochlea. It includes the three semicircular canals and the otolith organs, the saccule and utricle, working together to help us maintain balance, orientation, and posture in our daily activities. Now, let's explore the mechanism of hearing. This slide outlines the fascinating process by which our ears convert sound waves into signals that our brains can interpret. First, sound waves enter the ear canal and reach the eardrum, causing it to vibrate. These vibrations are then transmitted through the tiny bones in the middle ear, the malleus, incus, and stapes, amplifying the sound. Next, the stapes pushes against the oval window of the cochlea in the inner ear, creating waves in the fluid inside. These fluid waves stimulate tiny hair cells within the cochlea, which convert the mechanical vibrations into electrical signals. Finally, these electrical signals are sent via the auditory nerve to the brain, where they are processed and perceived as sound. Understanding this process highlights how intricate and efficient our hearing system truly is, connecting the physical sensations we experience to the complex neural pathways in our brain. This mechanism is a perfect example of how our body transforms simple physical stimuli into meaningful sensory information. Once the sound waves are captured by the external ear, they travel through the ear canal and cause the eardrum to vibrate. These vibrations are then transmitted via the ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes, to the oval window of the cochlea. This transfer of vibrations into the fluid inside the cochlea generates waves in the lymph, which ripple through the basilar membrane. These ripples bend the hair cells against the tectorial membrane, and this mechanical movement triggers nerve impulses in the associated afferent neurons. These impulses travel along the auditory nerves to the auditory cortex of the brain, where they are analyzed and ultimately recognized as specific sounds. This entire process, from sound wave reception to neural interpretation, is the essence of the hearing mechanism. It highlights how our ear transforms mechanical vibrations into electrical signals that our brain can understand, connecting the physical process to our perception of sound in a seamless way. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I truly appreciate the opportunity to share these insights with you. Remember, the key points we discussed highlight the importance of understanding our audience, leveraging innovative strategies, and continuously adapting to changing environments. These ideas are central to achieving success in our endeavors. I hope you found this presentation valuable and inspiring. If you have any questions or want to discuss further, I'm here to connect. Again, thank you for being such a great audience and for your commitment to growth and excellence.